All right, so we're just going to get started. And first, I want to thank my co-host slash producer, Adimola, who we connected on LinkedIn of all places and decided to put some training on. And I'll describe who I am and a little bit about myself and talk about what our process is for today, what we'll be learning, and then we'll jump right into the learning. And so let's get started. Today, we're going to be talking about a rapid training needs analysis and how to actually do one. And we want to make sure that you're ensuring and solving the right challenges that you are facing as HR professionals, instructional designers, learning and development professionals, training and development professionals. Our industry has a lot of titles for what we do. So we want to make sure that what we are doing is the right thing and learn how to do a rapid training needs analysis. A little bit about myself and who I am. My name is Claudette. I am a certified training and development professional. I'm also a certified professional in talent development. My current role is Chief Learning Officer for a company that I co-founded called Andres Consulting. And a little bit about my company, what we do is we create bespoke training programs. What that translates to is that we work with clients all across the world, fortunately, and we get to build training programs that help their professionals or employees or membership learn how to be better at what they do. Absolutely love what I've been doing. I've been doing it for approximately 24 years now, 24, I think it's 24, 25 years of building training and development. And I love everything about learning. I'm a lifelong learner, always will be one. And as I said, for today's session, what I'm going to do is about 40 minutes of conversation. I'm going to be discussing with you or talking at you, forgive me for the webinar style, with the information that we promised to deliver. So we're going to talk about three main topics. And then at the end, I'm going to leave about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes for any questions that you have. Now you can feel free to type in the chat if you'd like your questions so you can save them there. Or if you don't have it with you right now, you might want a pen and some paper to write down your questions. I will be giving notes throughout the entire presentation. So you will hear me say, I recommend you write down this to be able to support you for afterwards implementation. So pen and paper. But if you've got questions, and sometimes I don't know about you, but my brain forgets the question, I either write it down on my handy pad of paper, which is big binder right beside me, or you can just type it directly in the chat and we'll get to it at the end. The only other thing I want to let you know is that because everybody's time is precious, we want everybody to respect everybody else's time. And so if there are any behaviors that are deemed inappropriate, we will be removing people from the presentation. Otherwise, sit back, enjoy, and have fun, and please be engaged and have your questions ready. So let's get started. Today, the three things that I promised to talk about and make sure that you were able to accomplish is defining the types of performance gaps. We're going to do a second thing, which is identify critical components to increasing performance. And the third thing is I'm going to give you a rapid TNA process that you can use in your organization. So the way that it usually works, where I've worked over the last couple of years, is a lot of times as a learning and performance or an HR person, I'm an order taker. And for many, many years, what would happen would be somebody in management or a manager, a sponsor, somebody in leadership would come over from one of the business departments and say, we need a training program, fix this. And they wouldn't always allow us the asking of the question, is this really what the issue is? And over the years, I started looking and researching and finding out that there's more than just needs for training. It's not always a training issue. And one of the things you have to be able to do is to identify what the current state is, what your desired state is, and what's really actually causing that gap. It doesn't always necessarily mean that it's this thing that we think it is. And so there's 6 buckets that I'm going to talk about for the next about 5 minutes or so. So the first thing I want to talk about is the common one. It's a knowledge gap. And what that really translates to is, and you want to write this down, does the person actually know? So a lot of the times, if we assume, and a lot of people assume that if something is not going right, it's because somebody doesn't know something and training is required. And this could be true. So a question that you would want to ask is, does this employee or this department actually know the information that they're supposed to No. Do they know it? So that's your first bucket. And if there is a knowledge gap, they actually don't know it, then you should be potentially doing training. But there's other things that could cause performance gap. A second thing that could cause a performance gap is a skill. You actually know the information. Your problem is you're not practicing it. You don't have an opportunity to implement it on your job with a bit of frequency. Maybe you learned it 3, 4 years ago, 3, 4 weeks ago. It could be anywhere in that time frame, and you actually just have not practiced that particular skill. So if the first one is do they know, the second one is do they know how to do it? And just because somebody might have the knowledge, it doesn't mean that they get to practice it and use it on a frequent basis. The next thing that you might want to consider as a performance gap is motivation. Now, often we might know something, we might know how to do the thing, but we don't always have the motivation to do it. A really good example is in the health industry, a lot of times everybody has the knowledge that you're supposed to eat the healthy food. Everybody knows how to buy the healthy food. They know when you go into a store, you're going to look for fruits and vegetables, you're going to look for appropriate meat products, but you may not want to eat that particular thing. Your motivation might say to you, well, I want the bad food, or I'm not feeling like making the good, healthy choices. And so sometimes motivation gets in the way, and people don't necessarily have, as we talk about goals, attitudes, the right ideas, success, the support, or the performance. They're not motivated to do the thing. So I can know it, I can know how to do it. I just don't feel like it, or I don't want to. And that's another potential gap in how you are currently operating to where it is that you want to be. Another issue, old habits versus new habits. Habits are impacting. And one of the things that we really need to consider about when we're talking about performance and identifying performance gaps is there triggers in the way that are automatically causing your employee to perform underneath an old system. So very similar to the example I was giving before about food. Well, if I'm having a very stressful day, a chocolate bar or a bag of chips or crisps might be something that I reach for automatically. And year after year, when I've been in a bad frame of mind, the first thing I do is reach for a bag of chips. I'm not reaching for the healthy fruit. I'm not reaching for the healthy snack. I'm reaching for a junk food snack. And so my brain automatically says, stress, eat junk. And that's an old habit that I actually potentially have. The new habit that I'd have to worry about is making sure that I go from not eating the bad food to reaching for good food. And to do that, I just need to make sure that that's a new habit that I put in place. Another thing about habits is sometimes you want to get rid of your old habit, but then the environment that you are in doesn't support it. So we used to say, and I remember one of my old training development mentors used to say, people will do what they're praised for. They will not do what they're slapped for. And what that means is that if you got in trouble in the organization for doing a new process or a new procedure, that's better that you're trying to build this new habit. But the environment that you're in, whether that is your support system, the people around you, or if that is individuals who are your boss, your manager, these higher level individuals in the organization, your colleagues who are around you, your peers who are around you are getting mad at you for trying to do the right thing, then sometimes people will step back and their performance won't be up to standard, not because they don't know it, not because they don't know how to do it, not because they're not motivated, not because they haven't wanted to do the new habit, but the environment is not helping them to do it. Another example would be if you are trying to be efficient in a sales process, but the computer software that you're using is constantly glitching or breaking down. So it's not that you don't want to do the sales process, it's just the technology that's supporting it isn't supporting it efficiently. And then the last piece that it gives you a challenge is communication. I can know it, I can be able to do it, I want to do it, I have all the right habits in place to do it. The environment is set up to support me. And yet, when people are communicating with me, I have the wrong communication. A really phenomenal example of this would be we all have been told that we have to do four different things. All of them are all due, all at the exact same time because we're being communicated with it. Everything is important, everything's top priority. But you don't have enough hours in the day. And so you start doing multiple things, or your boss says, this is a top priority, sends you a request for something else. And as training development professionals, we might get like two or three requests, or HR, we might get two or three requests. We prioritize it the way that we think it's important, but we didn't get additional communication information. For example, if there is from an HR perspective, a formal complaint, and we have a new hire. We might sit there and say, okay, the formal complaint's more important, but the new hire is starting in literally 1 hour. And because we're working on the formal complaint, the new hire is not ready. So we weren't communicated the information about when they were going to start, so we couldn't prioritize our time. Because we can't do that, we know how to do a new hire. We know how to process a formal complaint. We have the skills because we've done both of those things. We're motivated to get both the complaint handled and dealing with the new hire. We know all the processes, the environment is set up. But because they didn't communicate that the new hire process and doing that documentation is what needs to be done first, you might end up doing the wrong thing and underperforming just because you weren't communicated or things weren't told to you. So these are your 6 areas of that potentially performance gaps. So it's not always knowledge. And in the training and development world, sometimes what you want to do when you're doing your rapid training needs analysis is you want to reinforce to people who are pushing just for training that maybe it's not training. And if you give me just a little bit of time, 1 day, maybe 2, that I will be able to find whether or not which of these 6 that it potentially is. So you'd want to write this down. So again, your performance gaps are knowledge, skills, motivation, habits, environment, and communication. So now that you know that there's multiple areas that you could potentially have performance challenges, let's talk about something else, the ABCDs. Now, in the instructional design world, there is different ways of writing learning objectives. And we have this model called the ABCD model. And this is actually a really awesome model also that you could potentially use when you're doing your rapid training needs analysis. So I'm going to describe what these letters actually stand for. So the first one, audience. When building a rapid training needs analysis, one of the things that's probably out of the top 3, audience is going to be number 2. There's going to be another one that's in front of it. But you need to define as clearly as possible who you are trying to improve whose in performance you're trying to improve. The reason why this is critical is, I'll give you a really phenomenal example. I was working on a project, and this is when I was order taker mode. Management comes to me and says, we need to build a sales training program. Sales team doesn't know what they're doing. We're not hitting the numbers that we need to hit. And we really do need to hit these numbers. So of course, I ask at the beginning, because before I didn't push for doing a training needs analysis, I'd be like, oh, you probably really know that this is the problem. So yes, I will go and find out that I will go build a training program for the sales department. I spent 8 weeks building out a training program. I followed one of the best performers around. I found what it is that they did. I spent 8 weeks on this particular project, and then I launched it. What happened was it wasn't the sales department that actually had the challenge. It was the IT department and the software that they were using. When they were launching the particular software, they actually didn't take into consideration what the sales team was doing, what their actual built-in sales process was, and it was backwards when they were trying to record the information. So because it was backwards, the sales staff had to go through training that they actually already knew the information, and we were trying to teach the wrong audience. The audience that needed to be fixed or trained was the tech department that built the software. And a rapid training needs analysis, if we had just asked the right questions, and if I had taken the time, and this is one of the things that prompted me to start asking, who's the audience? So you want to ask things like the demographics, where are they located? Which department are they in? What do they do? What's their education background? How many years of experience do they have? What kind of environment are they working in? You want to know as much as you can about your audience. And that's a part of you developing your rapid training assessment. In one day, you could probably ask these questions of who is the person that you want to actually learn? Who should be in this training experience? The next part is B, and that is going to be your behavior. So you now know who your audience is. You've defined who actually needs to be trained. That's fantastic. But now you need to figure out, what do you want them to actually do? And what do you want to hear them say? There's two things I would recommend you write down underneath behavior: see and do, hear and say. When you're thinking about behavior, those are the questions that you want to be able to ask your sponsor or the person asking for this training module. Or you want to define, what do you want to hear somebody say or see somebody do? Those are the two behaviors that you're looking for. If you can define in one of those two categories, you've caught it all. You don't need any other thing. What do you want to see somebody do, hear somebody say? And a little bit later, I'll give a full example of this functioning. Now, once you actually understand what you want to see somebody do and hear somebody say, because that's going to be your physical proof that the behavior is there, and you're going to describe that in detail once you know your audience. Now you've got your behavior. The next thing you want to be able to figure out as quickly as possible is, what conditions do you have and what constraints you have? So conditions. Now conditions are, well, how does this person perform? What do they need in order to perform effectively at their role? So if I'm going to be doing mechanics, I'm going to be a mechanic and I'm going to fix a car. I'm going to need a wrench. I'm going to need some screwdrivers. I'm going to need probably a garage. I'm going to probably need, with the new modern cars, a computer system to evaluate and do diagnostics. There's conditions that I have in order for me to show you this behavior, show you that I can fix a car. You want to see me fix the engine. You want me to see me do an oil change. You want me to describe to you that your oil is low. But first, I need to actually have a garage. I need to have the car. I need to be able to have the tools that I need to be able to do this. I might need some information about the car. And then the other thing that I might have to have is the constraints. As HR, or L&D professionals, we are always facing constraints. Constraints fall underneath two things: time, money. You either don't have sufficient enough time. So sometimes you want to do a training program and you know it's going to take like 3 weeks for people to know the information properly. And your boss or your manager or the person who's asked for the training says, you've got 3 hours on one day. That's a constraint. You might have staff can't be away from their desk because if they're not doing the sales calls, they'll lose money. So that's a money constraint. So you either have one of those two buckets. It's a time constraint, it's going to be a money constraint. And there's going to be additional contributing factors that we talk about. The last thing that you really need to take into consideration as the ABCDs is the degree. And this is degree of success. I cannot say that something is successful unless I know exactly what that success looks like. And I need to know the depth of success. For example, in compliance training, we will say to somebody that you have to pass an examination by 75%. And that's how we know you were successful. You might want to sit there and say, and this is going to sound strange, but I worked on a unicycle course once. And I don't know if you know what a unicycle is, but it's a big bike with one single solitary wheel. And what we had to do, proof for us, degree of success, or what we just defined as being success, was somebody had to be able to ride a unicycle in an obstacle course to the end for 5 minutes. That's the degree of success. So you would want to spend a little bit of time talking to top performers or your sponsors when you're doing your rapid analysis, and it literally could probably done in less than 30 minutes. What does success look like for you? And that's going to be your defining degree of success. So again, audience, be as specific as possible. Behavior, what do you want to see somebody do or hear somebody say? What conditions and constraints, so what do you need to give them so they can succeed? And what's going to potentially hinder them from succeeding? And then what does success look like, the degree of success? And this is going to contribute to your rapid training needs analysis. So you have your gaps, your 6 gaps that you can take a look at. And then you're going to look at the ABCDs. Then the next thing you want to look at is your performance outcomes. So performance outcomes are very interesting. Usually they fall within one of 4 buckets. So these 4 buckets are as follows. You have your output. And I'm going to give a great example for this in just a minute. Your output. So output is anything that's going to come out of your organizational goals and objectives. So either for the top example, it's items sold. So if I'm a retail industry, my output for outcomes for the organization is the number of items that need to be sold. We also think about the time. So how long does it take to process a sale? How long does it take to get stock in and put it up for sale? These are things that you want to be able to process depending upon who the person is that you're trying to train. The quality of the product is the next thing you want to consider. So if I'm selling an object, and that's one of the outputs that I need to have, I need to sell a certain number. So the sales quota, I'm a salesperson, and I'm required to sell 20 shirts every 2 hours. But out of the 20 shirts that I have in my store, all of them are defective. That quality is going to impact my ability to have the outcomes, which is bottom line profit. So my financial profit is going to be hit as well. So when you're looking at your performance outcomes, and I'll tell you how to use all of these in your rapid training needs analysis, is that it's going to fall underneath one of these buckets. Your performance outcome is critical. This is identifying the critical things that you need, is you're going to need to identify your audience, your behavior, your conditions and constraints to the degree that they're going to accomplish one of your outputs, your time, the quality, or a financial impact. A second example would be customer service, for example, in a restaurant. Clients served would be one of your outputs that you want to make sure. So I want to make sure in an hour in my restaurant that I'm pushing through 10 diners. And that's how I'm going to hit my ultimate goal at the end of the day, which is probably going to be driven by, because again, it's always time and money. Time. So I want to make sure that I'm impacting and hitting every single one of the people who come in to eat. I need to get 10 people through every hour on the hour. And so clients served. If I'm underperforming, that means I'm only serving 3 clients. And why is that happening? Is that a time impact? So does that mean that I'm actually not reaching to the diner's table in a timely manner? Are they taking too long to order? Are they eating slow? So you have to think about the time impact for this particular example. Then the quality. If I serve bad food, people are not going to be happy. So and then I might get more complaints. And then I also have to think about the cost per customer. So the advertising to get somebody to come into my restaurant. When they do come into the restaurant, am I giving them free products? And is that going to cost me additional money? If our people are complaining about the quality of the food, am I losing individuals out? So these are things that you want to take into consideration every single time. Your performance outcomes, your output, your time, quality, or finance. And when you're doing a rapid training needs analysis, you can only pick one of these. Normally what you want to do is if you're doing a full needs analysis, you would actually look at all 4 of these. But if you have to do a rapid one, pick one, and we'll talk about how to get one picked in a couple seconds. The last thing that you want to take into consideration is contributing factors. So we've said it at the beginning that there's performance challenges. And it's not always knowledge. It doesn't necessarily mean that your employee or the staff that you're supporting, that they don't know the information. So, yes, it can be one of the contributing factors. It doesn't mean it's the only contributing factor. There's also, we said before, work environment, systems and processes. And then the last one I want to talk about is external environment. So, all of us are living with COVID. Where the company that I previously worked for, and when COVID first started, we were face to face for all of our training and delivery, all of our training and delivery. Everything was face to face. We had no virtual live online, and we were teaching people how to use computer softwares. And the reason why we were actually face to face all the time was that we would actually take the computers to the classroom. So we had something called code mobiles, and the vehicle, which was a van, had 25 computers in it. We brought the Wi-Fi, we brought all the computer software and the computer gadgets with us to our client's location. We were operating well. We had over 200 people being trained on a daily basis, up to 1,000, depending upon how many of our code mobiles were on the road. Then COVID hit and Canada shut down. So our output was fantastic. Our time was great. Our quality was amazing, and our financials were great. Our external environment, COVID-19, immediately impacted our ability to create output, time, quality, and our financials took a hit. So sometimes there are things that are completely outside of your control. And when you're thinking about why is an employee, so our delivery team were called the Code Squad. Our Code Squad employees' performance was impacted, and it had nothing to do with anything internal. It was 100% COVID shut down the world. Schools closed down because one of the primary places that we went to was school systems. Community centers closed down. Libraries closed down. So that had nothing to do with us as an organization. I can't build a training program to fix for COVID-19. So that was one of the things you have to consider all the time when you're doing your training needs analysis is it an internal issue or is it an external issue? So for the next 10 minutes, we're going to talk about the actual rapid training analysis process and how to get it done. I can do a rapid training needs analysis in 1 hour. So a lot of times when previously, as I said at the very beginning, for those of you who missed it, as I used to be an order taker, a manager would come to me and say, Claudette, they need to get trained on fill in the blank. And I would jump up, start building the training program. I might do a couple quick surveys. I might do some observation to find out how it's properly done. I might do a job analysis or a competency analysis. And really quick, I just start building learning objectives, start thinking about the facilitator's guide. What kind of videos do I have to make if there's videos involved? But I wouldn't ask the appropriate questions. Then I learned if I can ask for 1 day, 8 hours, or 2 days, and using a rapid training needs analysis, instead of me building wrong product, because I did it at least 3 times, and when you're wasting 6 to 8 weeks, and that's at a cost to your organization, you're hitting their time, you're hitting their finances or their money. And I don't know what it's like for those of you who are on this call, but in my world, if there is a financial constraint in the organization, the first department that they're coming after is the training department, the HR department. We usually get the brunt of the blame. And because we get the brunt of the blame, we have learned over time to ask for 1 day to investigate what's happening. So how do you, in 1 day, find out what actually is happening? So the first thing you want to do is you want to ask, could the person do the job if they wanted to? The way that this was originally trained to me is, in the threat of death, could the person actually perform? That was a little too harsh for me. So I changed it a little bit and found a better way of saying it. Could the person do the job if they really wanted to? And you're going to ask why or why not. And the reason why this is important is that at the beginning, we gave you performance gaps. The knowledge, skills, motivation, and habit, those are all personal items. A person If they are missing those four things, the only one that actually requires training is knowledge gap. That's it. None of the other four that exist, or three that exist, require actually a training process. And so you could save yourself 6 to 8 weeks, depending upon how long it takes you to build a training program. Some people it takes 3 months, depending upon the complexity. Some take 6 months, some take longer. If a person knows how to do it, why are you building a training program? And so one of the first things you want to do is quickly ask this question, and then immediately you're not solving for a knowledge gap. You can solve for something else. And if it falls within the other three, whether it's a skill, whether it's motivation, or whether it's a habit, you may not even need to build training for those three items either. So you have to find out why or why not they can't do it. If it is knowledge, training is required. If it is any of the other three, does it mean that they just need to do a mentorship program? If it's a skill, does that mean that they just have to get a little bit of additional time away from their current responsibilities and just start practicing the other responsibilities in live time? If it's motivation, no matter how much you try to train for motivation, if somebody doesn't feel like doing something, they're not going to do it. And we know this. How many of us in this room have not felt like doing something, and no matter what anybody said, you're just not going to do it? So no matter forcing a person to go to training, maybe they want the time off, maybe they want to break from their desk, but they're not going to improve their performance if their motivation is lacking. So whether there's an internal lacking of motivation or an external intrinsic motivation that's required, this is the first question that you need to ask and find out whether or not which one of those 6 categories it falls on. If it's an environmental or a communication thing, environmental might be a process or organizational process that needs to be fixed, not a training process. And immediately you're not building a training program if it's an environmental thing. If your software is not working, why would I train somebody on broken software? Software needs to be fixed. That's an organizational improvement process. Now, why does this become very valuable for you as in training and development professionals or HR? Is that you will help your organization and become a person, as we call it here, taking a seat at the table, meaning that you're sitting with leadership, helping them improve their business outcome. And your value in the organization goes up exponentially if you're solving business problems and not just designing a training program. If as an HR person, you're sitting there sending somebody off to training that they do not need, that's a financial impact, that's a time impact. And if you can prevent it and provide a better solution, you become a better business partner. So this is the first thing you want to ask. And literally this has saved me from building, at least in the last 2 years, 5 training programs. And most of my training programs take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to do, and I haven't had to build them. I find it completely fascinating. Now, it's not that I'm out of a job, because I am now a value add within the organization because I'm not getting them to waste time or money. And then the things that I actually do have to build training on, I'm actually building more efficiently, more effectively, and making a bigger impact. And I've won awards for my training programs because I get to spend more time on where it's needed and what's necessary. The next thing you want to do is you're going to follow somebody around. Normally, when you're doing a full training analysis, you want to do surveys and focus groups and interviews. If you have to do a rapid one, you don't necessarily have the time to send out a survey because it might take 2 or 3 days for people to give you the response back. You don't want to spend the time on that. Then you might have the challenge of doing a focus group, and then you have to get all these people together in the exact same room. And that's always a bit of a challenge to get people in the same room. They might be busy and people's schedules get in the way. And the type of person that you'd probably want in the room is the top performers, and top performers are always busy. One of the things that we say is the person who does the work the most effective gets 10% of the people do all of the work because they're the most effective group. So what you want to do instead, if you have the option out of surveying, focus groups, interviews, data analysis, don't spend your time around doing that. If you need to do it quickly, in that one day, spend 1 hour following around a person who does not know what they're doing. Find one of the top performers, and you're going to talk to the project sponsor or a manager who's the best in the organization, who's got the best numbers. If it's sales, Who's got the best customer service if it's customer service? You're going to ask that question. And then what you're going to do is follow them around for an hour and see what they're doing differently. And especially if most of the times, because as a part of the ABCDs, you've got constraints, no one's going to let you train your staff for 8 or 10 or 12 days. It's just not going to happen. You're probably going to get 1 day of training, maybe 3, maybe 5 days tops. If you're looking for extended training, they'll probably send you off to like a college or university course. So if you are going to do training, you're probably going to be training somebody for 3 hours on 1 or 2 skills. Find out what those 1 or 2 skills that the top performer is doing. Then you can teach your novice performer to do those 1 or 2 skills and incrementally improve their performance. So you're not trying to get them to be superstar overnight, but you're going to give them skills to get where they need to go. So simplest way, half an hour with one, half an hour with the other. Then when you are looking at the differences between the two, you want to actually see what the difference between their outcomes and what their contributing factors for that. And as I said, for rapid training needs analysis, only pick one of the 4 potential outcomes. So you're going to potentially look at whether it is, what is their output? So if I'm looking at a factory worker who's building a cog, if the top performer is pushing out 30 cogs every single solitary hour, then I'm going to watch this person, and the output I'm looking for, or their outcome, is how many cogs do they push out? And then my focus is, what are they doing differently in comparison to the other individual? And that's what I need to train on. Because then at least you know that the program that you're building is giving a specific outcome. And when you're trying to talk about your success to your sponsor, to your manager, of was that training efficient, effective, because you were very specific about the degree of what success looks like, and you're able to quantitatively prove that the audience that you're going for, that they demonstrated you saw them do or you heard them say, that in this output, they were able to do this, and the contributing factors for them being successful is X, Y, and Z. That's how you are very effective at doing a rapid training needs analysis, and your time's not wasted. And then, last but not least, we've said it several times. I'm going to repeat it one more time. Select your outcome. What do you want to see? What do you want to hear? And the reason why you want to ask your sponsor, what's important about this is asking the sponsor. The person who's coming to ask you to build a training program, they're probably going to be the person who's looking for success. And if you don't have a clear understanding of what success means like to them, and as clear as possible, which is why I say, what do you want to see them do or hear them say? If you can get that defined down to the clearest statement, what will end up happening is when you run your training program, you can go back to the sponsor and said you want to see salesperson close 10% of their sales on a daily basis using this computer system. And you can go back and you can measure that and make it quantitative. Now, if other things aren't working out, that's fine, because you have agreed to only produce one particular result that would make an impact on the organization. So again, for a rapid training needs analysis process, first thing you want to do is make sure, is training required or is it something else? By asking, could they do it? Then instead of doing all the data triangulation that you normally do on a full training needs analysis, do an observation of somebody who knows what they're doing. And you're going to ask the sponsor for the program or the person, a manager in the organization, who's new, who's a top performer. Follow both around for about a half an hour. What you're going to look for is a specific outcome. Pick one of the 4, whether it's outcome, the time that they're doing it, the quality of their work, or the financial impact. Pick one of those 4s, watch it, and take a look for the external environment. And maybe you can't do external environment, but you could probably ask 1 or 2 quick questions. The work environment, the processes and the procedures, or is it, and you're going to completely actually all the time ignore employee performance. So again, you want to just pick contributing factors. Is it external? Is it processes and procedures? Is it the environment that they're working in? And then once you have that, you're going to go back and ask the sponsor, what does success look like to you? What do you want to see them do? What do you want to hear them say? And that is how you do a rapid training needs analysis in order to make sure that you're solving for the right problem and not the wrong one. And I have a minute to spare. So now we're going to go on to questions.